Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, people of all ages, Coach Bryant here, coming at you with a throwback, the golden rules of not getting dropped. Let's be honest, getting dropped is not fun, but in this throwback episode, we'll walk you through the steps on avoiding that. As always, be sure to subscribe, like, shoot us comments, and if you have other questions, you can email us, coach@buildpeakcompete. Now, on with the episode.
What's up, folks? Welcome to another epic episode of Coaches on Couch.
Bing slouches.
We've got
With
Stitch
an
on the couch today.
Extra slouchy.
You know, you can't see her real well. She's pretty camouflaged on this couch.
Kind of blends in.
Today we're talking about the golden rules of not getting dropped.
Yes. Which is
I'm
a great
Coach Dale
topic.
Sanford.
And I'm Coach Bryant Funston.
We are co-founders of BPC Performance Coaching, where we specialize in helping time-crunched athletes such as yourself better optimize their busy schedules and maximize their athletic performance. Every BPC coach is trained in our 5 pillars coaching system, has developed over the last decade through our work with athletes of all ages and ability levels, from fresh off the couch to world championship competitors. You can find out more about BPC by going to buildpeakcompete.com, Facebook and YouTube at buildpeakcompete, or Instagram at BPC Performance. Whew.
Cool. Well, let's jump into it.
All right. So first, before we kind of get into like the nitty gritty on not getting dropped, I think for the sake of the newer rider, we need to kind of drop on some of those golden rules of safety as far as pack riding goes, or pack riding, group riding. You know, with the time change, we've got all of our weekly group rides rolling again. You know, whether it's, you know, your favorite group ride or your weekday worlds, your Hammerfest, you know, these things are important no matter what, to kind of keep everybody safe. And then, again, we'll go into the things that are gonna help you not get dropped. But the big one, my big one for safety is not overlapping wheels. It's really, really easy to do when the front end slows a little bit and you come up on somebody, and then all of a sudden you're, you know, 6 inches overlapped. And if an obstacle comes up or hazard in the road and that person needs to move over, they're going to swipe your front wheel. And it's not the person in front that usually goes down. It's the person whose front wheel gets taken out that hits the deck. So, you know, just be really cautious about...
protect your front wheel.
Protect your front wheel with everything you got. You know,
vast majority of crashes that happen are from not protecting your front wheel.
I would say unless you're very comfortable with the people you're riding with, you know them really well, and you're intentionally echeloning, that would be the only reason to overlap bikes.
Yep, for sure. And if you're in because this is not just, we don't want to just talk about group ride stuff. This can also translate over to races.
Sure.
So this is something where, and I was actually having this conversation on the Sunday ride that I did with a newer rider who was not feeling very comfortable in the group. If you're in a situation where, you know, you're riding behind, you know, 2 people in front of you, ideally you don't want to place your wheel directly behind their wheel, because if they have to grab brakes, you know, their wheel comes straight back into yours, and it's really easy for that overlap to happen. So instead, you want to make sure you're just slightly staggered, but still in a draft. So what I'm always doing, like in a race situation, is there's the 2 people riding in front of me, if you're watching the video here, and I will stick my wheel like directly between those 2. And that's not like crossing over it, but in between. That way, if they break, I'm not having their wheels flying into mine. So being slightly staggered, and even, you know, it's easy, especially for beginner people, to start staring at, you hear protect your front wheel. And so staring at your front wheel, not a good thing. You want to be feeling out, you know, kind of get that, using peripherals and get that feel for, you know, how big of a gap do you have between your tire and their tire, your front, their back. but then use their body as a way to know whether or not they're closing that gap down, as opposed to staring at their back wheel and watching it come at you.
Yeah. Good. Number 2, make sure your movements are smooth and deliberate.
Yes.
When you have to make a lateral move in a group, make sure that that happens extremely smooth. And when you start the movement, make sure you finish the movement. So don't move over, decide not, and then come back, and then just you're all over the place. If you're gonna move over to the side, move over. You don't have to. Don't whip it over. Don't move over. You can even tell people you're coming.
Even better. Yes.
I'm
Indicate
coming over.
what you're planning on doing.
Point to the spot that you want. Like give everybody notice that you're moving. If it's in the case of a hazard and you have to, the big ones like potholes. If you have to move around a pothole, note that your bike and your body don't have to necessarily go in the same, go everywhere together all the time. So you can actually move your bike around the pothole without having to sling your body left and right. And it makes the entire movement much smaller. So you can be safe, ride safe, call it out, and then you can move around that pothole without slinging yourself over into the yellow line, and causing everybody behind you to freak out and have to hit their brakes. Yeah. So smooth and deliberate movements.
And adding to that, so if you're behind and you can't see the pothole coming, and we're going to talk about calling out hazards, but if you're the person in front, you're the one responsible for keeping the group safe. So you need to be looking up the road. Don't get so drawn into a conversation with the person next to you. You need to be the one taking care of the group, looking up the road, looking for hazards, and trying to position the pack, navigate them around stuff well in advance. Because if you call something out when it's 10 feet up the road, that is not going to make it back to the back of the group in time.
No.
So you need to be the one that's aware and making sure you're steering the group and trying to keep them safe.
Yeah. So we just talked about it. Number 3, call out hazards. This is a pretty simple one. We won't go too much into it. If you see something that could cause early,
if you wouldn't want to hit it.
Yeah, if you don't want to hit it, call it out.
Yep.
If you think it could cause somebody to freak out and brake suddenly, call it out.
When in doubt,
call it out.
Call it out.
Yeah. I don't care if it's a pine cone. Call it out.
You're better off not trying to guess, is that a leaf? Is that a 2x4? What is that?
Yeah.
If you're unsure and it looks like it could be something hazardous, motion early, call it out, let people know.
Yep. Especially, and if you're on the front, like Brian said, move the pack around it. If you see it early enough, you can shift the pack, kind of like you're leading the flock. Shift the pack around it, and then
like a shepherd.
Yeah, something like that.
You're like a shepherd.
Yeah. So with that, number 4 is if you get calls from behind. This is my pet peeve. If you get calls from behind, pass it up. It's like
the game of telephone.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what it is that you yell from the back, car back, and it gets 3 people.
Yeah.
And then somebody decides, oh, well, they heard it. No, they didn't. You're just not going to skip a person. So
the same goes with, and this isn't written down, the same goes when you come to a turn and you are unsure whether the cross traffic is clear or not. You slow up, you stop, you turn. The people need to be calling out whether it's still clear, not clear. I mean, being vocal and communicating on a ride is allowed.
Yeah. Yeah, you're allowed to talk.
You're allowed to talk. It's encouraged, actually. Last one.
5. Feather your brakes. Feather.
This goes back to the smooth and deliberate.
And all of you guys who are really excited about your new disc brakes, learn to feather them. Before you get on a group ride and you lock them down, while you're in front of 20 other people. So
how many fingers do you hold your brakes with?
2 at the most.
Yeah, I'm usually 1 or 2.
Yeah.
So if you're wrapping all your fingers around the brake, it's a lot tougher to feather with 4 fingers than it is
even if
1 or 2.
Even if I usually hold the far 2 so I can shift with these.
Yeah.
But I'll usually only pull with the weakest finger I have. Just to, and if I need more pressure I can. But but generally speaking, if you freak out, and put too much pressure on the brakes, it gets magnified all the way back. So like somebody 6, 7, 8 people behind you has to really jam on their brakes, and somebody behind them could be in big trouble.
Yes.
All because you decided to grab a handful of brake because for whatever reason.
Exactly.
So, attack squirrel or something.
And this is going to kind of segue into the next section here. And we've got a list of stuff, but there's a good chance we're going to be totally out of order and go way off topic here.
This is
we're going to hit the key stuff.
This is a hot topic for us. We've done this talk before, and
it's so important. So we're going to move into like kind of the golden rules of not getting dropped, which is essentially how to strategically ride within a group in a race with people that are faster than you maybe. What you should be doing to not only apply the stuff about being safe, but also maximize your chances of staying with that pack.
Yes.
And so Dale was just talking about, feathering your brakes. We talked about all those golden rules of safety there. Rule number 1 of pack positioning, if you're seeing one person or 2 people that are violating those rules consistently, what should you do, Dale?
Get away from them.
Stay away from them.
Get away from them.
And don't think staying away from them is putting yourself 2 behind them or 1 next to them. No, you need to go
way away from them.
You need to go
preferably in front of them.
In front of them.
Yeah.
You need to put yourself in front of that person.
Yeah.
And if you're not sure who the squirrely rider is in the group and no one's wanting to hang around you,
you're
that person. You're that person.
Yeah. So like we have a list, but again, we're all over the place. So this is a part of people you don't want to position yourself near strategically, tactically. Do not position yourself near, preferably in front of someone who is riding extremely sketchy or looks really nervous being in a group.
Yep.
Get in front of them. Somebody who looks like they're like on the rivet. I mean, if they're just breathing like crazy or like, they're sweating like a pig and they have pain on their face.
And a big thing to look for is the body rock. If they're rocking the body a lot, you can see the efforts getting up there and they're like doing the bounce all over the saddle.
Yeah.
And using their upper body a lot more than you think they should be.
Right.
That's a good sign that they are on the rivet.
Because that is going to roll into the next person to stay away from, which is the person that's constantly opening gaps.
Yes.
If you're behind somebody who's constantly opening gaps and having to close them, eventually they're going to pop.
Yes.
And then you're behind them, so now you have to not only close their body length plus the gap that they've opened. So if you see somebody who's constantly opening gaps when the ride gets a little harder, get in front of them. Stay in front of them. And then
each one of those is that little bit of energy you're having to waste. If you find yourself having to brake and then accelerate often, and it's because of someone else, you need to be away from that person.
Yeah. The last person is a little more on the race side of it, but it can come into play if you're in a Hammerfest ride or something like that. Oh, for sure,
definitely.
But the person, if you somebody who know that maybe they could be fit as a fiddle, but if they cannot corner worth a damn, stay away from them. Get in front of them. Because if you're in front of them and something bad happens, you're in front of them. Everybody behind them is now affected by whatever they caused or happened. So any of those people, get in front of them. Position yourself in front of them. We've seen it time and time again where there's people whose fitness outshines their ability to handle their own bike.
Oh, for sure.
So when they get into a harder group ride setting, they put themselves in positions to have to make decisions when they're on the rivet, and they make bad decisions when they're on the rivet.
Or on the other side of things, like they may have the strength to open a gap in a corner and get back to the group.
Right.
Whereas you may be trying to hang with a group or a race or a pack or whatever that's fitness level maybe above you, which means you got to be so efficient. And, you got to make sure you're trying to make that ride as easy as you can. And I've seen it before where, a stronger rider who's not cornering well opens this big gap going into a corner. And then coming out of it, they hammer it. They make it back to the group, and you're left gapped and going, oh, well, if I'd have just been with the wheel in front of that and no gap would have opened, I'd have been fine.
Yep.
but you put yourself in a bad place.
Yeah, if you routinely position, so here's the next piece of it is position yourself close to the front, but not on the front. Unless you're like one of the strongest people, and this ride is not going to affect you like that.
Mm-hmm.
Position yourself close to the front, but not on the front, to where you're having to put out a lot of the energy to keep the group going. But if you position yourself closer to the front, you get the better end of the draft,
Mm-hmm.
and less amount of the yo-yoing that happens when somebody hits their brakes too hard or doesn't call out a hazard, and everybody has to react to it. You don't get those things quite as much when you're closer to the front. And at the same time, like on the front, again, you're in front of the majority of the group, so that if anything does
Just
happen,
from a percentage standpoint, yes,
yeah.
there's less wheels ahead of you that could be overlapped.
Yeah.
When you're at the back of the pack, every wheel has an opportunity to be overlapped, essentially.
And this is especially important for like harder sections of a route. So like if there's a climb on your route or something like that,
or a corner,
or a corner that is fast and could separate the group, make sure you're up front. If it's a corner, you get to choose your own line through the corner. If you're further back and it's already bottlenecked, you have no choice but to slow down, avoid other people who are trying to slow down for the corner, and then you have to put out a big acceleration and catch back up. I mean, that's a huge reason to stay close to the front.
I guarantee you a lot of the people who are not used to group riding may feel as though they have worse fitness than they actually do because they are getting dropped, but really it's because you're working harder than the people at the front.
Yeah.
And in a race situation, I do everything I can to make sure I'm like top 5 wheels going through any corner.
Yep.
And if it's a hilly section of a course,
yep,
where you've got downhills leading to uphills, where you're carrying speed into these short kicker hills, if you're at the back, you are getting yo-yoed, you're hitting brakes, your momentum's getting taken away from you. People at the front are keeping their momentum. You're hitting brakes and then sprinting up and over hills. You are working so much harder than what the people at the front are. So following that rule and putting yourself near the front, but not necessarily on the front, is going to be, it'll be amazing how much further you'll stay with a group by doing that.
Yeah, this is like my number one rule, especially for any route or race with a major hill or a climb. I'm always like close to the front, if not trying to set the tempo on the front.
Yeah, we'll dive into that
like
one.
If it goes into, so if you're coming into like a hill, which is like a lot of people, especially in our area, since we don't really have them.
Yeah, we don't have long climbs.
Like long
for sure,
climbs, are it's like fear. It's immediate fear.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, being a little bit heavier as well,
strong.
But I'm stocky.
I'm well built.
So going uphill is not my forte, but I've developed a system for like more consistently ending up with the group at the top of a climb, and that usually revolves around me either being on the front or off the front, like before the climb, so that I can get a head start.
Correct. Or
like, and especially if I'm with the group on the front, I'll try to set tempo enough that it's good for me, but maybe hard enough that people don't want to attack around it. But if they did, I still have a lot more time until like the entire field tries to pass me, because I'm going to be...
Because you're at the front.
I'm at the front, and I'm going to get as big as I can.
Dale's swerving all over the place.
I'm not going to swerve, but I'm going to be as big as I can and make people go around me to slow up the entire group to make sure that I get up this climb with everybody else.
Yeah, the big keys there. You're riding at an effort level that you're hoping is going to deter attacks, but it's not so hard that if an attack goes, you can't respond at least some. You have to have some room where you can elevate your pace. In a situation where they maybe attack so hard that you can't go with, you've now put yourself in a good position to where as people come past you, there's a good chance you're going to be at the top by the time the back of the group is there, and now you're still attached. So those are all huge points. One thing to add to that, if that's your strategy, do not put an effort in leading to the bottom of the climb that you're then going to try to set tempo on.
I've been there too.
Yeah, we'll dive into that a little bit more here in a second.
So next piece here is huge, massive, is knowing where the wind is coming from. If you're trying to draft off of somebody and you're on the wrong side of them, you're not going to get any draft at all.
Yeah, if it's a crosswind and you're on the wrong side,
you're SOL.
That's not good. And the pace is hard. If you're shout out to Perry Nice, which is going on right now.
Oh yeah.
And it has been echelon city.
Yeah.
You can see how important it is to stay near the front, number one, but also finding the draft. The draft runs out in that race
a little bit
a lot.
in the old Strade Bianchi there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're like, the easiest way to know like where the wind is coming from is just look for flags, look at the treetops and see what direction the trees are bending. Most
check before you leave. Check it's going to change.
So
I mean, there's a chance it can change, but at least have a general feel. Is it coming out of the southwest, southeast, north? Like, have a general idea of where it's coming from.
I'm not a very good
I'm a weatherman.
Meteorologist.
I'm totally all about it. But no, it's huge. And if after you've done it, after you've ridden in a group for a while, you should get a good I can feel where that draft is. If you feel like you're pushing harder than you should, move yourself around a little bit. Yeah. Move a little left, move a little right. What allows that perceived effort to drop some? And where, these big ears are actually helpful for they're like my wind gauges.
I was going to say, when I had my mustache.
When one's making a louder noise than the other, I know that this side's catching more wind, and then I just kind of tuck myself to the opposite side.
Yeah. So yeah, if you don't know where the wind is coming from, you're already in trouble. But the other thing is, you can watch to see, especially if it's a crosswind, watch to see where other people are lining themselves up. If you see people lining up, like more than 1, 2, 3 people lining up to the left of somebody, well, you should probably be to the left of the person in front of you.
And to put numbers to this, one of the races we have here each year, the Tiger Lane Crit Series, it seems like it's always windy. And there was a section, of course, one of the people I coach, he and I were in the same race. And on this one section where we were getting hit with a right to left wind, I was putting myself essentially almost riding at the curb. Like, I'm in the little gutter section, and my wattage, when the effort was really high early in the race, I was at just over 300 watts on this section for like 15 seconds before the turn. He was in the wind, essentially.
The wrong side.
And I know this. I went back and looked at the data, and I had video going, so I can see him. He wasn't accelerating. I wasn't accelerating. We stayed even that whole section, and he was over 500 watts. So it was a 200 plus watt difference. And for those that aren't familiar with power, there's not many people around that are going to hold over 500 watts for longer than, even a minute. If you're holding over 500 for 2 minutes, you're a pretty strong person.
Yeah.
So that's a huge, huge difference. And it was all pack positioning.
Yeah.
Which goes into kind of the next part of this, which is, you got to know the course. So on this, it had gone from tailwind to we took a right-hand turn. So in the tailwind, it doesn't really matter whether you're left side or right side. You just want to be behind someone in front of you. But knowing that a right-hand turn was coming up, where should you be? Well, you need to be on the left side of the pack. He was not on the left side of the pack. He was on the right side of the pack, and as soon as we made that turn, it was he was immediately in the wind with nowhere to go because everyone was already lined up and going straight to the gutter. Yep. So know the course. Know that if you got a tailwind right now and you got a left or a right-hand turn, you need to position yourself so you're going to be downwind after the turn happens. If it's a headwind, same thing. Headwind, what's coming up? What turn is happening? Don't wait till after the turn to try to get into a good position, because people will fight to hold a good position.
Yeah, if you're doing your weekday group rides, your weekday Hammerfest or whatever it might be, you're doing the same route every week. You should know the route. Like, so look at the wind. You should know after what turn, what direction the wind's going to come from after that turn, and then position yourself accordingly. It's a little bit, crits are a little bit more important with it because the speed is so high that as soon as you make that turn, like that wind is going to hit you completely different. And if you don't kind of change your position before taking the turn, you could be out of it, and that split can happen like in seconds. Versus on a road race, you're on a longer stretch. It'll probably take a little bit for that elastic to kind of break, or a road setting. But at high crit speeds, that stuff happens so fast. I mean, the group can just split.
It can. For sure.
In no time.
And the more technical a course, which we kind of talked about already, but the more technical a course is, the more turns they are, kind of going to racing now. Like a crit that's got a lot of turns, your position from the gun is super important. Like you need to fight to be top 3 as much of the front part of that race as you can, because lots of turns is a lot of opportunity for small gaps to open. It's so technical that it gets strung out. The bottleneck is worse. The people at the back are braking and then sprinting. You will work a lot less, and the odds of a break happening are a lot higher on a technical, 6, 7, 8 corner crit or course versus, a 4 corner.
Yeah. And this is maybe a slight diversion, but
we told them we were going to probably go.
We talked about, you talked about like, a lot of people are probably thinking they're a lot less fit than they are because they keep getting dropped on a group ride that they feel like they should be able to hang on or whatever. But a lot of times, like if it's like a Hammerfest ride, that's like the mindset people are going in with. So it starts off a lot like a crit. So like the first like 10 minutes of any Hammerfest ride is probably going to be like super hard. And then it's going to ease up. And then, it'll pop off again later. But at that point, the sting has already hit people's legs. And so there's going to be a lot less people maybe willing to do the work. So the hard sections aren't going to be as long anymore. For a tip for everybody who's like frustrated with getting dropped from the ride that they're on, if they get dropped early, like, this is a huge reason for you to position yourself up front early and just keep telling yourself, I just got to make it 10 minutes. I got to make it the first 10 minutes, first 15 minutes. It never lasts more than the first 15 minutes of the race. Never. I mean, I've rarely, the only time I've ever seen even a race scenario that the pace stayed high for more than 15 minutes was like when they shortened a Pro 1-2 crit to like 25 minutes.
That whole thing was full gas.
That was insane.
Yeah.
But, you just keep telling yourself, I just got to make it 10 minutes and everybody will just chill out.
Yep.
Because it'll happen.
It will.
Always happens.
That's the huge key. Whether it's a crit or a group ride, just say, hey, I'm going to hold on one more minute. When it's hard at the beginning, just say, I'm just going to hold on one more minute. I'm going to hold on. Just keep telling yourself. Break it into a smaller thing. Don't think, I got to hold this effort for an entire 60 minutes. Don't think that way. Think, I'm going to hold it for 60 more seconds. And it's odds are, unless you're riding way above the level that you currently are, odds are it's going to slow down and you're going to be okay. But this kind of goes into one of our other points, which is don't be the first half hero. So we talked about there's a reason the first 10 minutes are so hard, and that's because everyone feels good the first 5 minutes. Everyone's got one match to burn. You don't want to be burning your best match when everyone else is fresh. You want to be trying to conserve as much as you can while those other people that aren't as smart as you all are burning their matches. You're saving yours as much as you can that front half. So if you're someone who is feeling good or you're in a race, conserve as much as possible the first half.
Yep.
It never seems to fail that people that are newer to group riding, They want to show that they're strong enough to be there. They don't want to be seen as though they're not doing enough work or participating as much as they should. And so I've seen a lot of people who we've invited out to like group rides and stuff that I'm like, holy cow, this person is strong, because they're taking their first few pulls, like got people in the hurt locker, and then it's
bye-bye.
Yeah, 4th of July, we got grenades and fireworks going off here where they totally blow up. So do not be the first half hero.
No. I mean, I'm not going to lie, it looks a lot cooler when you're there at the end.
Yes. Save it for the end.
If the ride starts with 20 people and ends with 4, I'm sure there's probably 5, 6, 10 people in there that probably worked too hard the first half and then got dropped because they put too much effort into that first half of the ride. So like one of my big things is you ride with the same people a lot, right? So you're like occasionally we'll get a person that comes from out of town that wants to come and do the Hammerfest rides, and everybody's like, "Who is that? How strong are they?"
Yeah.
Like, but for the most part, like who's there and who's strong and who's like everybody's fitness. So in knowing that, position yourself around those people and like call it what you might, but you're finding the good wheels basically. You're positioning yourself around people who are strong to where if a move goes, that person's probably going to jump on it, and then they'll use their energy to close it down, and then you can get a free ride up to the move, or just in the process of closing it down, you didn't have to do a whole lot.
Because that's the other mistake that I see people make as well, is as soon as they see a gap open, like, oh my gosh, there's a gap, I got to close it. And you feel like you're the person, you're so concerned about not getting dropped that you're not patient and you're not seeing whether or not someone else will actually close that for you. So just having that bit of patience, or like Dale was just saying, being on a good wheel, the person that is not going to get left behind if a break goes or if a small gap opens, or be behind the person that always is the, oh my gosh, I'm not going to get dropped, and let them close it for you.
If they're strong, that's a good person to be behind, because they will turn themselves inside out to not get dropped. Close a lot of moves for you, and then you'll have a lot of energy toward the end, and they'll be nowhere to be found.
And when we say good wheels, me being a taller, larger human, and I race a lot against a lot of like the really tiny people, a good wheel for me is someone who is my size or as close to my size or bigger than me as possible. You don't want to be stuck behind someone who's significantly smaller than you. That's not, especially if you're in any sort of rotation. If you're behind someone small, and you're essentially going to do 2 pulls versus 1 pull in the wind. So if you are working within a group, do not put yourself behind a smaller person who's not giving you a draft. Sit out 1 rotation, or scoot up in the rotation. Find the big people and be behind them so that you do get as much recovery as possible and you're doing as little work as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. When we go out on group rides, there's a few people, like Brian's one of them, that if something goes up the road and he's not in it, then just wait for Brian. Brian's probably gonna go for it at some point. So
our homie Pete Sully does that too. Shout out to Pete Sully. Yeah. Pete's a very patient, smart,
real patient
pack positioner.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, if there are certain people that that they just can't handle like letting something go up the road. And I'm that way a lot too, but like if I'm not feeling that great one day or something like that, I'll just wait for the people I know that aren't in it, that are not going to let it just go. And when they go, I'll go, and just get an easier ride.
And that may come back to haunt you occasionally. I mean, there may be chances that that you didn't chase and that group did get away. But if you think about it, your goal is to try to maximize your chance of staying with the group, and sometimes that means a small group gets away. But if something goes and there's a lot more people behind you than there are in front of you, your best bet, if this is a fast group, is to be patient and let someone else close it. Be ready for that next reaction to happen, and that's going to benefit you. And then last kind of thing on this whole good wheel versus a bad wheel, generally you don't, if you're in a rotation, so we're talking like a rotating pace line, or maybe you did make a smaller breakaway, there's 5, 6 of you, and you're all rotating through, you generally don't want to be on the strongest rider. And it's maybe not even the strongest rider. That's probably a bad way to put it. Don't be on the wheel of the person who's pulling through extra hard.
Working the hardest.
So you don't want to be in front of that person, and you don't want to be behind that person. Because there always is, it seems, the person that surges through. And now you're having to work to stay on their wheel, and it's hard to come around them because they've upped the pace. But it's also challenging if that's the person who's rotating in front of you. Now they've gapped you, you've just taken a pull, and now you're trying to jump back on their wheel. So both of those situations, you're working harder than you need to be. There was a race down in Louisiana that I did, and I made the breakaway of about 8 of us. And there was one rider who was super strong, but we were a long ways from the finish, and I wasn't worried about him attacking and leaving, so I didn't need to be on his wheel. But he was pulling through hard. And initially I was on his wheel, and I was like, no, this is a bad place to be. Because each time coming through, it was like a little match. I could tell I was burning. Yeah. And there was a person in the group who was laboring to get through each time. I was like, that's the wheel I got to be on. So I pretended like I was eating snacks. I sat out one little rotation and then hopped on him. And it was so much easier. It was like night and day. The same pack, same group of people, but just how I moved myself behind a person who was rotating through slower versus harder made my perceived effort go way down, and I ended up, fresher at the end of that than I would have otherwise.
Yeah, it's huge. I know last year at Rockabilly, I got ousted into being in the early breakaway, and then magically.
Which, by the way, if you don't know Coach Dale, we'll be doing our pre-race stuff. They'll be like, meh, I'll go early. Should I go from the gun? I want to go from the gun. Okay, Dale, you got it. From the gun, man.
It's kind of my thing.
It is. It's his jam.
But it only works about half the time. It either goes really well or really bad. And last year, we ended up in the breakaway with about 5 of the Team Type 1 guys, or the Novo guys. And then it was TJ Kalelo was in there, and so I was TJ was pulling after me, and I was pulling after one of the T1D guys. Okay. And so he would pull so hard, and then I would have to pull through really hard, and then TJ would just pull through. I was like, TJ's having a good day. TJ's having a good day. He's riding well. And so I was eventually I had to pull out of the entire rotation and try to sit myself back in among a couple of guys who were not as strong. But if I had stayed in that spot, I'd have made it half a lap. Yeah. I mean, it was exactly pushing. Yeah. So, I mean, we averaged 20, almost 28 miles an hour.
Yeah, you guys were rolling
on the first lap with the hills. Yep. And had I not moved, I wouldn't have made it a half a lap. And thankfully, moved and made it a little bit longer. And still, the breakaway was just driving
just rolling. Which goes into the next kind of thing here. You do not actually have to work. There's no rule that says you have to put in a ton of work to keep things going. So if your goal is to stay with a group, don't interrupt things, but you don't have to pull through. Don't feel like you have to, and just communicate that, especially in a group ride situation. Just I'm happy to be here. I'm going to stay out of the way. I'm going to stay on the back. I'm struggling. I mean, that's totally fine. Road races, people will be saying that just because road racers are liars when it comes down to it. and everyone's just lying about how they feel and how tired they are and when they're going to work. And there's a lot of gamesmanship that's going on,
Love it.
strategery, but don't feel like you have to pull through. And if you're pulling through and you can tell you're redlined, it's time to sit out, or at least skip a few each time, and say, hey, I'll pull every third, or I'll pull every fourth time, or save me till the end. I'll pull at the end, or whatever it is. But don't feel like you're obligated to do work.
Yeah, I've definitely been in a few scenarios where I've totally faked it and pretended like I was a lot more hurt than I really was, and it was just because I got into the break not feeling good, but I didn't want to like blow a bunch of energy because it was early, and so you play like you put a little. I put a huge effort to get here.
Yeah, like just bounce, do the pain face.
Yeah.
I'm dying.
I'm trying, guys. I'm trying.
Give me one. Save. And I love this one being bigger. If I do make a breakaway, I'm always like, when we get to the hills, and you do the same. And it's, let's just keep it steady, guys. Keep the group together. Keep it together. Keep it together.
Yeah.
Or I'll work on the flats. You need me on the flats. Don't drop me. Don't drop me. Keep me together. I'm a big value on the flats.
Yeah, I'm constantly putting out my worth to the smaller riders when we get close to the climbs.
And you'll be especially so like newer folks. If you haven't, I know quite a few people who listen to this probably interested in racing as well. You'll be amazed on group rides and in races. We talked about gaps that have opened and people trying to close it. You will be amazed at how hard someone who's pulling you to the group will work if you just give them some encouragement, whether it's your teammate or not. So this is...
Now we're just into strategy.
This is some strategy, but this is how to not get dropped, right?
It's
so
true.
This is you not getting dropped.
Yeah.
This is you maximizing your energy, but you'll be amazed how, like, great job, keep going, almost there.
Oh, yeah.
Just
Close
something
it, close
quick
it,
like
close
that.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll be amazed how big someone will, or how deep someone will dig to... Maybe they were going to pull up. They were going to give up. They were going to quit. But they'll dig deeper, and now you're saving energy. You're saving a match, and they're burning an even bigger match. So now it's like twofold. You're saving energy, and they're likely going to be useless after that.
The last time we did this talk, we did an entire section on how to manipulate...
Pack manipulation?
Yeah, people in the pack. But
I like it. If you guys want to hear more, if anyone's listening on Facebook right now, if you like pack manipulation...
Yeah, like you said, the especially the newer the rider, the newer the rider, the easier they are to manipulate into doing whatever you want them to do.
Oh, for sure.
Close gaps for you, go pull back moves, let them lead off of an attack and then roll with them and then go over the top.
And if you can make them feel guilty, like, oh, don't let that open. Ah, no. Then they're like, oh, I violated the rules of the pack and I let a gap open.
Just push to the bottom of the hill and I'll take over.
Yes, which is our next topic here. I guess we'll dive into that.
Yeah,
we'll get off manipulation here for a second. I've seen many a good rider fall victim to being the one who takes the hard pull. If you're in any situation really. So if you take your hard pull and you peel off at the bottom of a climb, good way to totally get shelled.
Yeah, immediately.
Even if you're feeling like you're one of the stronger in the group, it's an easy way to get shelled because effort's going to rise. So you've got someone who's been recovering on your wheel, you pull through to the base of the climb, now it's like you're taking 2 pulls or 3 pulls or 4 pulls in a row because you're not going to get a good draft. So you do not want to hit the base of a climb with legs that are feeling loaded up. So either pull off early, or if a climb's coming, you can kind of time how long you're pulling to sort of set it up. I'm always sort of thinking through how much are we traveling each rotation? Where do I need to be to make sure I'm not the one pulling into the base of a climb?
Yeah, that's pretty huge. I've definitely found myself on the bad end of that a few times, just because everybody gets excited when they're going downhill or flat or tailwind, like pretty fast. and then you like spend too much time up front, and then you notice that nobody's coming around you, and it's because they all know that
The climb's coming.
and
You're like, uh-oh.
they're like, oh, geez. So now I have to use all my tactics to get as big as I can so that nobody can go around me.
Which is, if it does come to that, you're better off staying on the front versus peeling off and letting the next person come through. You're better off going through the tactic Dale talked about
because
earlier.
as soon as you let up, the person that comes around you, regardless, is going to be going harder than you.
Yep.
So then you have to minimum kind of match that effort a little bit, because you don't like. What'll happen is if you let off completely, the field just goes boom, 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 and you're off the back like quick. If you don't keep some pressure on the pedals and like slowly make your way to the back, you're gonna have to put out a massive effort when that last person passes you.
Well, if you think about it, in any group ride race that you're in, the highest intensity stuff, it like never fails that as soon as you hit a climb, intensity goes up.
Sure.
Right? No one's like, oh, we're at a hill, let's chill and back this effort way down. It's always, even if you're trying to be smooth and not redline folks, the hills always end up being harder, like the hardest part, it seems, even when you're trying to be smooth. So intensity is going to go up over what it has been. So if you're at your limit, you hit the bottom, it's going up higher. So you either need to stay on the front and do your tempo work and try to keep folks from rotating through, or make sure you're not the one pulling to the base of the climb.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Cool.
Got anything else?
Looking to make sure we didn't lose or miss anything here.
We could talk all day on this subject.
No, I think that's the big stuff. I guess the only other thing I would add would just be it's really easy to neglect nutrition when you're on a faster ride. So if it's a longer, faster ride, you need to be diligent about taking opportunities to eat and drink.
Yep.
And usually it's like, don't count on it being at set intervals. So you need to be kind of like, oh, the pace is slowed down. Now's a great time to get a drink. Now's the time to eat. So take advantage of lulls in pace to make sure you're fueling.
Yep.
But definitely don't neglect it. It's happened a lot where you're so worried about getting dropped or staying with, or effort's so high that you don't eat and drink, and that will come back to bite you too. So
that'll
it may
get
be
dropped.
Yeah, for sure. And if you're not comfortable actually like taking one hand off the bars to get your bottle when pace is higher, that's something you got to work on. Absolutely. And do it by yourself first.
Yeah, please. Everyone in that group will thank you later.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's all we got for today.
If we missed anything, post it in the comments on Facebook here, or shoot us a message, or
keep the ideas coming in on Facebook. Appreciate you guys hanging out, listening.
Stitch says she thanks you as well.
Stitch was pretty stress-free today.
Stitch, anything to add?
Nada.
All right, I guess that's it.
All right, guys. We'll catch you guys next time. Adios.
Peace.